everybody. Well, I started calling this the Happy Hour broadcast with Dr. Paul and Nancy, but it's still the friendliest show on radio. I decided to say we're all Rambo on radio. How's that, Matt?
Rambo on radio?
We're Rambo on radio, and we're the best cook on Facebook. How's that?
Okay.
And Nancy and I later are going to take our car to get oil change and lube while you watch YouTube.
Okay.
Got it? All right. Seriously, folks, we're in Springfield, Missouri. I finally called this my adopted hometown, Springburg, USA. We're right in the middle of the United States, and we're in the southwest quadrant of Missouri. So all of you folks in Germany and other parts of the world, you can get out your globe and spin it around and drop your finger and look for us, because we're there. And we're here every Friday at this time until next week. And next Friday, we move the time to 9:30 instead of 9 o'clock Central Daylight Time. So Shirley in St. Joe, reset your alarm clock, dear lady. Make sure you don't miss us. Just because we don't show up at 9 o'clock next Friday morning doesn't mean we won't be here. We'll be preceded by Dr. Marty Hamilton with his 30-minute show called Basics of Faith. So today we are honored to have a very special guest.
I know that's right.
Now, she's been our
Boy,
friend.
yeah.
She's been our friend Nancy for what, about 8 years, something like that?
Something like that.
And she is a doctor of audiology. That means she really knows everything there is to know about the ear. Doctor of audiology, Dr. Lindsay Hobbs. Now, get to her in a moment. First, my disclaimer. Acts Ministry, Acts Media Group, they are not responsible for any of the contents of this program. So put your mind at ease. Jim Whining, you're not responsible. Jim Whining is the president of Acts Ministry, and he's probably watching because he usually does.
Yes, he watches on YouTube.
Now, before we get into the serious stuff, I decided to turn over a new leaf and try to bring us some useful information before we do the interview. I'm going to give you 5 facts about something that's involved in geography. If you take the first letter of these geographical places and line them up, they spell homes, H-O-M-E-S. I'm talking about the Great Lakes in the United States. Lake Huron, Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, and Lake Superior. That's how you can remember the Great Lakes. Homes, H-O-M-E-S. Got that, Jason?
Yes.
Want to make sure you got it. All right. Here's something that's quite interesting, I think, about these lakes. They are the largest body of fresh water on the earth.
Oh, wow.
Right here in the United States of America. When combined, the Great Lakes equals, get this, 1/5 of the entire planet's total freshwater supply.
Wow.
Right here in the United States of America. That's a mind-boggling 6 quadrillion gallons of water. Now, don't ask me how many zeros, because I just learned to pronounce quadrillion.
There's actually at least 4.
4?
It's a lot of water.
It's a lot of water. Okay, consider this. These 5 lakes, H-O-M-E-S, 5 lakes, are over 95,000 square miles of combined area with a total span of 750 miles. Now, that's a fur piece, as we say in the Ozarks, 750 miles. Is that like going to Denver or someplace from Springburg, USA? It's a long ways, isn't it? 750 miles. Okay. This means that the lakes are larger than the United Kingdom.
Well, yeah.
Think about that. Larger than Britain or England, Scotland, Wales, and Southern Ireland. Now, the Great Lakes are so large that they've earned the nickname as the nation's 4th seacoast.
Oh, yeah.
Think about that. Even though 4 of the 5 lakes are bordered by both Canada and the United States. Lake Michigan is the only lake that is completely within the boundaries of the United States. Now, even though we think of these 5 bodies of water as lakes because they're fresh water, they exhibit many behaviors associated with seas. For example, the Great Lakes experience tides twice a day. Now, did you know, you fellows behind the scenes here, do you know what controls the tides? What causes the tides?
The moon.
The moon. You agree? Hey, smart guys.
They are
Now,
pretty
that's
smart.
Matthew Pearson, otherwise known as Matt Dillon Pearson. And or sometimes we just call him Festus for short. Or maybe Festus is seated at your left hand there, otherwise known as Jason Cobb, who is our shift manager. Aren't we having a good time? That's why we call it the happy hour. You tuned in and probably thought that the happy hour had to happen between 4 and 5 o'clock. No, it happens starting next week between 9:30 and 10:30. All right. Now then, all 5 lakes are actually connected via channels and have a constant current
Go ahead.
that cycles water between each lake. There's a current that cycles the water. Think about that. Starting from the farthest westward lake, Lake Superior. Water flows from Superior toward Michigan, Huron, and into Erie. From here, the water flows over Niagara Falls into Lake Ontario and out to the Atlantic Ocean by way of the St. Lawrence River. Okay, let's see what else does this thing tell us. Depending on the depth of each lake, experts have found that the time required to fully replace all the water in a lake, or it's called retention time, that's to replace it, can vary from a couple of years to centuries. Because Superior is so large, its retention time is 194 years. It would take 194 years to refill it if you emptied it. However, the smallest, which is Lake Erie, has a retention of just over 2.5 years. Now, that sounds like Fellows Lake out north of Springburg, USA. Ontario's retention is 6 years, followed by Huron at 22 years, and finally, Lake Michigan was 77 years. But think about it. Superior, Lake Superior, to refill it would take 194 years. Long before the Wright brothers made flight an option, people used waterways to get from point A to point B. And this waterway has been very popular since the days of the Vikings. How about that? Okay, enough of that. I have lots more information, but didn't you find that interesting? If you found that interesting, let's have a round of applause or some laughter or something. Ah, there we go. Now then, to the serious matter. We didn't invite Dr. Lindsay Hobbs here just to learn about the Great Lakes. We invited her here so she can tell us what a doctor of audiology does about these things. They're called hearing devices.
Hearing aids.
They're called
Aid. Hearing.
They're called hearing technological devices or something like that. They're hearing aids. And they happen to be mine, and I was one of her first patients.
That
I
is
really
right.
was. And that's been like 8 years ago maybe. How long has it been?
It's been about 6 years, I believe.
6 years? Well, I was with Dr. Brian Vesely a couple of years before you came on board, and you were his first on-board audiologist. First of all, tell us, what is a doctor of audiology?
So we study and are doctors of the ears. To put it in short terms, we give hearing tests diagnostically. We also, which a lot of people don't know, we are also doctors in the vestibular disorders. So balance, dizziness, we know how to test and diagnose for those as well.
Okay, so somebody that has problems with balance and they begin to feel dizzy and all that kind of thing. Could be, what, an inner ear problem, we used to say?
Correct. Your vestibular organ is actually connected very closely to your cochlea, which is where the hair cells are. And a lot of times the two can correlate together.
All right. Now, you mentioned the word cochlear. I've heard of cochlear implants.
Yes.
What are we talking about? Rush Limbaugh, the great radio talk show host, has been on for years. He has cochlear implants. What are they?
So a cochlear implant is basically a step above the hearing aids that you just showed.
Hearing devices.
Hearing devices.
Hearing technological devices.
So they are made for patients who hearing aids no longer help. Their hearing has become severe enough that they really need that extra step. It is a major surgery. They go into the cochlea and actually place an electrical device in there, electrodes, and then you wear a device. If you've seen Rush Limbaugh, you can see he's got a device on the back of his head that actually transmits the information directly into the cochlea. So it kind of replaces those hair cells the best that we can. So if hearing aids don't help, that's definitely the next step.
If there is a surgical procedure involved, which there is with cochlear implants, pretty specialized surgery, I would think. Does the surgeon have a doctor of audiology standing by looking over his shoulder?
Oh, heavens no. You would not want me doing the surgery. We do the programming. We do the pre-testing. I have been in several cochlear implant surgeries. There are some testing that we can do, but it's the testing during the surgery. An ear, nose, and throat or otolaryngologist or an otologist are one of the ones that actually performs the surgery.
Before we go further with this line of discussion, I believe it's really important for us to clarify for our audience, nationally, internationally, what is required to become a doctor of audiology.
Here in the United States, it's an 8-year program, 4 years of undergrad, and then 4 years of grad school, which is our doctorate degree.
Now, what do you study in those 4 years of grad school?
It's all about the ears.
It's amazing how much is in these little things.
Absolutely. When I was looking into this, and the question is, okay, how do you study the ear for 4 years? But it is so intricate, and everything working from from the beginning, our big old pinnas that our ears that catch the sound, all the way down to the brain actually processing that information. There's a lot that goes into that.
When you were an undergrad student, did you take courses similar to a pre-med student?
Yes and no. We do not have to have the pre-med requirements because it's not a medical degree. But there are some requirements, pre-audiology classes that we did take. A lot of audiologists, myself included, we have speech pathology undergraduate degrees. So, we kind of link in communication and hearing.
I find that very interesting. Yes, Nancy.
Is there such a thing, thank you, Jesus, that a cognitive deficit would start interfering with your hearing?
Absolutely. Or vice versa.
That is so awesome.
See, Nancy was a nurse working in geriatrics for 30-some years, and she's well aware of cognitive deficiencies that show up with age, but they can show up, of course, with younger people.
So what kind of test would it take to figure out, or would that come from the nursing and doctor perspective, and then they would do whatever needed regarding cognition, and somehow or another go to you guys? And is there a test that you would do to say, no, this is really they've got a hearing problem, but it's really the cognitive deficit is the problem?
There's not really a test on our end as far as pinpointing that. That is definitely going to be more the medical side of it. Most of the time when patients come to us, they've already had that diagnosis. And
Okay. Okay.
what we've seen, the studies are actually very, very new. One of the major studies was actually brought out in 2014. So very, very new, linking things like dementia and Alzheimer's to hearing loss. That does not mean if you have a hearing loss, you're going to get dementia or Alzheimer's.
Exactly.
But it does mean if you have a hearing loss and you already have that precursor to dementia and you go untreated with that hearing loss, there is a greater chance of developing dementia or Alzheimer's quicker. So
Yeah.
we see a lot of it, but we don't actually diagnose the dementia or Alzheimer's side of it.
Well, thank you, Jesus. Then I'll say the kids are bringing in their mom or their dad. Okay, is it the kids that pick up on something like that? That aside from such a dignity issue, they wouldn't say anything to be in front of the patient, I'll put it, but they would say something to you guys so that you could give your opinion on what's going on.
I've had that happen a few times. That's a very thin line to tread for us. We can tell them some of the signs. We can tell them some of, because we, even in our clinic, we have a list of the warning signs, or, it's not just forgetting where you put your keys.
Yes.
I do that. It's more the short-term memory starts to go. And I have had some family members pull me aside and ask me questions, and usually it's a matter of directing them to the right place.
Yeah. Okay.
But then I've also had, patients who have come in and they're aware, very, very much aware.
I would think that if you had an increased ability to hear, to be aware of your surroundings, it would probably, at the very least, slow the progression of some dementia, rather than people just entering into a closed-off world. If they could stay alert to what's going on around them.
Yeah.
Because the brain, like most parts of the body, has the ability to form new transmitters, new transit system. I know the heart does, has that ability. Dr. Hobbs, I wanted to ask you about causes of hearing loss, common causes.
Good question. First can be you're born with it. We call that congenital. And we now do infant testing, so it is required that they are tested before they leave the hospital.
Oh, that's good.
So we can catch it. And then you've got genetics. Genetics always plays a huge role in everything. More typically than not, we do see it passed down from mother to daughter when it comes to genetics. Men, we tend to see, my dad was a farmer, I'm a farmer, so, is it genetics, or is it the fact that you are both exposed to a lot of noise? Which brings us to the next one. Noise is probably our most common. We live in a very noisy world. Constant music or, occupation, what we do for our jobs. A lot of people don't work in a quiet little office. Then there's the medication. There are a lot of ototoxic drugs, and that's just a fancy word for that drug can cause hearing loss. Chemotherapy is one of the most common drugs that can cause hearing loss. And then viral infections is another one.
I remember when Dr. Brian Vesley first opened his office, Sound Advice. By the way,
Was it Brian or Stephen?
Brian Vesley, Vesley. But by the way, Sound Advice is now located on South National. What's the exact address down there?
4145 South National.
It's on the the northwest corner of South National and Republic Road. It's a very beautiful building, a great location, and it's called Sound Advice, and that's where Dr. Hobbs works. However, the corporate offices are up the street someplace up there, and since the early days when I met Dr. Vesley, his clinics have grown greatly in number. How many are there now?
I honestly don't know the exact number because it keeps changing, but last number I heard was around 250 clinics throughout the United States.
I hope you heard that. I met Brian Vesley 8 years ago. He was in a small office, had 2 rooms where he could check hearing. He was the only doctor there. He had a receptionist. Today, he has 210, did you say?
No.
250 or more, give or take.
250 or more clinics, offices where you can see an audiologist. Isn't that amazing? Now, when I visited with him, he's still a young man.
Yes.
Very young man, young father, young husband. When I visited with him, I couldn't help but say, Dr. Vesley, you're a young guy. You have seen something because of generational things. Lots of these young people walking around with earplugs, listening to stuff and listening to loud music and the automobiles that they put all this loud stuff in. You may be on to something here about the future of audiology.
That's right.
And I believe I was right.
I believe you were.
Now, I say that to get around to this. Most people think that these high-tech hearing devices are just for old people. That's not the case. Did you hear her say before a baby leaves the hospital, they are tested for their hearing? So there's no age when you automatically go to an audiologist, have your ears checked. You need to do that regularly, starting right now.
Absolutely. And the younger you start the process, if you do have a hearing loss, the easier it is for your brain to transition into that new world. And, the more candles we put on the cake, the longer we go without, doing that amplification, the more damage we're actually doing to our ears.
I'm going to steal that phrase for a sermon title, Candles on the Cake. For those who don't know it, I'm also a pastor. And twice a month we have a Sunday afternoon service. And you say something around me, it just may end up in a sermon, and you probably won't even get credit for it. How about that? About these things here. Folks, let me tell you, these are almost antiques now because the technology advances so quickly. But there's little buttons on the top. My choice was to use the little buttons to raise the volume or lower the volume. I have had them set through your laptop computer so that they would go to like a surround sound, which when I was going to shows in Branson, I used the surround sound feature, which was really neat. But these little devices, when they put a thing around my neck and they get their laptop computer out and they start checking things, they can say, well, I see where you've been wearing your hearing technological devices, an average of 15 hours a day. I see that 50% of the time you were filtering out noise, and 10% of the time you were listening to music. Isn't it amazing? And this is now out of date. But they work for me, and when I'm at home, if there's a really good John Wayne Western, big, really a good one, I hang this Bluetooth thing around my neck, and it's hooked into our big screen TV, and I push that button, and it's like I'm in a great big, the finest movie theater in Springfield with surround sound every place. I let my oldest son try these one time, and he was, as they say, blown away, blown away. So anyway, these are now out of date. What's new on the market now?
The biggest thing, especially since your hearing aids, because those look like they're probably, 2012, 13?
No, they're earlier
Something
than
like-
that. I got these, let's see, wait a minute, 2012. Yeah, that'd be about 2012. Yeah, 9 years ago.
So you also, I see you have a cell phone sitting there. Think about a phone back in 2012 versus a phone today, or your big screen TV 2012 versus today. Technology changes so quickly. It does with hearing aids as well. Now we're looking at, you have a rechargeable option. So a lot of patients would say, well, I'm having to change batteries constantly, or, having trouble changing those batteries because they are so small. Now, all you have to do is drop them in a charger and charge them overnight, just like you do your cell phone. So that's been a huge change and convenience for patients.
And people who are traveling, they can take the charger with them. Is there an option if they're going to be in a vehicle a long time to plug them into what used to be a cigarette lighter?
Yes, they've now converted it to a USB port, and I'm sorry.
Is the charger wireless?
No, it's not wireless, not yet.
Not yet.
Dot.
Just wait. I mean, this technology is so amazing. There's more ability in this little thing here than what it took to send a man to the moon. And I wear these faithfully. When I get up in the morning after my shower, these go in. And I keep them in all day long unless I'm doing radio, Facebook, and YouTube, and I have these things on. I used to wear them under these, and I thought, no, that's maybe not a good idea. So anyway, and one time, if you fellows will remember, the first time I left them here, drove away from here without my hearing aids, and the office was locked. And I was lost. And even my cell phone was here. So
Oh no.
I want you to know, because of these, my memory is really getting good. Okay, now, remember, there's over 250 of these sound advice connected offices around over the nation, more coming on board all the time. So obviously, doctors of audiology, that's the direction to go. Now, I'm not going to say anything against just technicians who test your hearing.
Right.
No, we're dealing here with, I want to keep it as apples and oranges. You guys can do some things like recognize the need for that cochlear implant. What about tinnitus? Some people call it tinnitus. I also hear it called tinnitus. What about this?
So that is actually becoming more and more of a common question because more and more people are becoming aware of it.
That's a ringing in the ears, by the way.
It can be ringing, buzzing, humming, ocean waves, crickets, cicadas. But because it's something that's happening in the inner ear, we can't actually physically go in and see it. So everything that we know about tinnitus really truly is a theory. And with that, it's also, we don't have a cure. That's the negative side of it. The positive side is we are very positive and know that a lot of times tinnitus is related to hearing loss. Because if we go back to that cochlea, you've got those hair cells or cilia that are in the cochlea. When those hair cells, respond to sound, they send that sound into an electrical energy to your auditory nerve. Well, if those hair cells are damaged due to noise or anything we talked about earlier, that nerve isn't receiving that signal anymore. And the nerve kind of does this whole, well, hey, something's wrong. And it's almost like an alarm system. So what we typically tell people is if you do have tinnitus, ringing in the ears, roaring, sounds that are there but not actually in the physical world, it is a good idea to get your hearing tested to see if that is the cause. If not, we need to look into further and see what we can do to help with, some relief.
This is a subject that is very close to me, very dear to my heart. Well, not so dear. I don't like the ringing in my ears. I have it right now. I remember when this happened. I had offices in this building back in the early 80s on the lower level. I left the office one day, got in the car, pulled out on Sunshine out here, got to the traffic light. I'm sitting there waiting for a chance to turn on the Glenstone, and all of a sudden I had this ringing in my ears, or buzzing. It's been there ever since. This is a long time, but this thing, I'll never forget when it showed up. It just like that, there it was, and it's been there ever since. We'll come back to some more stuff. In the meantime, I'm going to put Matthew, Dylan, Pearson, or Festus on the job over there. To tell them to give us a 30-second commercial that really sends people to the shop.
I'm limited to 30 seconds now.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, let me pull my camera up so people can see my face.
Oh,
Poor
boy.
people.
There's not a
All right.
cure. There's not a cure for that, man.
There's not a cure for that. I apologize if my face offends you. Send emails to Dr. Paul.
There you go.
Jason said he loves my face. Thank you. All right, so today's show is brought to you by naturalsolutionstore.bz. Now, I have a couple questions I want to ask you guys today. My question is this. Let me pull my screen up here. Do you have blood sugar? Yes. Do you have a colon?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking apostrophes or anything like that. Blood pressure?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have weight gain?
No.
Do you have eyeballs?
Yep.
Sometimes they can get inflamed. Well, today's product I'm going to talk about is Aronia. It helps to regulate your blood sugar, helps to support colon health, and reduces blood pressure, reduces weight gain, and reduces eye inflammation. I didn't even know that eye inflammation was a thing. So clinical studies of Aronia show that it positive effects on heart disease, brain health, cholesterol, blood sugar, and diabetes and cancer. So if you want to get help with any of that, go online, www.naturalsolutionstore.bz, and pick up a bottle today. So back to you guys.
Well done. I'm proud of you, Matthew. And by the way, Aronia is a great product. I have taken it, and it makes a difference in blood pressure over a period of time. It's like all natural solutions, natural supplements. They don't work overnight, and we do not say, do this and don't pay attention to your doctor. We don't do any of that. We encourage people to go ahead with their usual medical care and consult with their doctor about any supplement and so forth. But if you really want to be with today's trend and supplements, go to naturalsolutionstore.b as in boy, z as in zebra, and otherwise you can access it through www. Most people don't even have to say that anymore. Acts Media Group, and that Acts is ACTS. Acts Ministry, by the way, with their department of Acts Media Group, they make all this possible. The happy hour and other shows that you see here and here and so forth. And Acts Ministry is 26 years old. Nancy and I had the blessing of being the founders of Acts Ministry 26 years ago, and we were blessed to be able to turn it over to Dr. Jim Whining 5 years ago, and he has taken it to a whole new level, very high tech, more high tech even than my high tech hearing devices. So we're very, very proud of Acts Ministry, and it's holy pride. It's a holy pride. They stress, as we always have, unity in Christ through the Holy Spirit, and the motto I gave the ministry was serving where needed, and Dr. Whining added a second one, which I think is very apropos, saying doing the right thing, and they do, working with autism, the handicapped, veterans, bringing shows like this to bring attention to these valuable instruments called the ears, and that there's more than one option out there. And so, folks, whatever you do, no matter your age, check in with sound advice here in Springfield. If you're someplace else, find them where you are, and arrange an appointment and have these instruments checked out. Maybe you can head something off. If not, you give them the care and love and treatment they deserve. Can you imagine what it would be like to walk around not being able to hear, or to drive around not being able to hear? I saw
Some
something.
husbands might say they'd be glad not to hear.
I saw there's a program. We've had some fellows on this program who champion a weight loss and weight maintenance plan, and I saw one of their responses. Somebody did from Texas on Facebook this morning. He said something to this effect: been off of tacos for 8 weeks and lost his sight in his right ear. How clever we are. All right, let's get back to our topic at hand: ears and tinnitus and Dr. Hobbs. By the way, when it comes to eyesight, eyes are very important. You know, and I wear sight assisting devices here. We talk about, regard to our eyes, we really would like to have 20/20 vision. Are there some numbers like that for hearing?
In a generalized sense, 25 decibels or better. So anything below 25 decibels is considered hearing within normal limits.
Anything below 25 decibels is hearing within normal limits?
Yes, sir.
So if you have to have 25 decibels or above, then you have a hearing problem, possibly.
Correct.
Ah. Now, see, fellows, we're learning something here today, and it's very important stuff that we're learning. I want to also go back and touch on this congenital thing. Many people in our audience may not know what congenital means. Can you explain that?
So that just means that it is something that you are born with.
Okay.
So the way that the baby is formed, there's certain stages of development through that 9 months. And I know as far as the ears go, if they pass that stage of development and the ears don't develop, or something in the ears, causes issues, there's no continuing. I mean, you can't get it back. So, it just means you were
it's a
born
matter
with
of what you're born with.
Correct.
Congenital. Now, the word genetics, we know people are having gene testing done and all that sort of thing, and we have some genetically modified foods, and et cetera. What do you mean here by genetics in terms of hearing?
So, just like everything else, you get your blue eyes from your mom and your brown hair from your dad and things like that. You can also inherit hearing loss from your family. And sometimes it's very prevalent. You'll see a lot of family members who are truly deaf, or you'll see, like I said, more often in women, I'll see them start to develop hearing loss at a younger age, starting in their 20s and 30s. Sometimes they don't catch it until they're older, and it's hard to detect. I mean, we can't specifically say, absolutely, this is genetics, unless we have those hearing tests from the very beginning. And then we have your parents' hearing tests from the very beginning. So now that we're becoming more and more aware and starting these newborn hearing screenings, we're going to be able to develop more and more, genetic type testing.
Okay, so congenital, you're born with it, with a hearing loss. Genetically speaking, this is something that would show up progressively as you age, which doesn't mean getting old, but aging, like from age 4, 5, 10, 12, 16, the magical driving age or whatever. So genetics really means that hearing loss over a period of time.
It can show up at any point.
I remember when, as a young pastor and a young evangelist, I'd be in various churches, and there'd be old men wearing this huge thing around their neck, and they'd have this big thing around their ear and so forth. And every once in a while, there'd be this loud squeal because they had turned the volume up too high, and it would be a loud squeal. It would be enough to stop the service. It was rare. In fact, I cannot remember, Nancy, seeing a woman back in those days wearing one of those things. I wonder if that was a matter of vanity.
Women did, and I knew a few when I very first started in this field. They're just really, really good at hiding it.
I noticed there's a TV commercial, some woman, middle-aged lady, and she loves the fact that she can put the hearing aid down in her ear and her hair covers it, and so nobody knows. Speaking of that, we need to go back here to the update on these. Besides chargeable, they do have stuff that goes down in your ear that you only change ever so often, that sort of thing.
So there's so many different types of hearing loss because God didn't make us all the same. Two people might have the same hearing loss, but they might have different needs and lifestyles and things like that. So there's something that we can put down into your ear and it stays there 24/7 until we remove it and place a new device in. That's for a certain population and a very small population. They have the hearing aids that you can put in and take out just like these, but it's actually just in your ear. We have options that are Bluetooth. You know, you were talking about earlier having a device around your neck and watching TV. Well, now we can get rid of that device and everything is directly Bluetoothed. Bluetooth to your phone, Bluetooth to a TV device. You can get phone calls, stream podcasts, watch YouTube videos like this, all with it going directly into your hearing aids.
I wanted to, it just came to me, I remember, Nancy, and I want to ask you about this. As I said earlier, I am still a pastor with a small group that meets on Sunday afternoons, and we meet in a rented space, a chapel. By the way, it's first and third Sundays, so first Sunday's coming up, 2 o'clock. We have rented the chapel at a place called Maranatha Village for 22 years. Beautiful chapel. And it's on the end of the nursing home portion of a retirement village. And so in their chapel, I noticed around all this high-tech sound equipment, big soundboard and all that, they have these devices, not much smaller than this cell phone, almost like something you would wear for a cordless microphone. And they are hearing assisting devices, and they have several of them. And that's for when they have their chapel services on Sunday morning and Sunday night. Nursing home people have a hearing disorder, and they have devices for them. And I'm amazed that they don't have their own devices, or at least not devices sufficient to meet their need in a chapel service. So that tells me the market is still wide open because of young people destroying their hearing with loud noises, people working around machinery, whether it's agricultural or industrial, people with loud automobiles. I think about these race drivers. Wow, that's loud.
Or the military.
In the military. And then we have, so not all the older population obviously have adequate hearing devices. Otherwise, they wouldn't have hearing assisting devices in a chapel for the attendees. Think about that.
Some of that maybe they could have the hearing devices. That type of device that you're talking about is a direct. So going back to when you were talking about watching John Wayne, you can hear the TV with your hearing aids, but man, putting that device around your neck and getting it going directly into your ears, you get that surround sound effect, and it really blocks out a lot of background noise. Those type of devices kind of do the same thing. They just don't connect to a hearing aid. So, you know, one of the residents can actually put that on their ears and hear the preacher directly without all of that interference. So it's like the preacher is talking right into their ears.
So they're still hearing assisting devices, but they're really very specific in a sense. We have, it's 9:46. We're going to run out of time here in just a little bit, but folks, you can tell that I've been around a while because I remember. What are you laughing about?
Just a few candles on the cake.
Yeah.
I got it written down. I'm going to be preaching about that in
This
about
cake is loaded, you guys.
in about 2 weeks, so you need to show up and hear your sermon. Anyway, John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart, those guys, they don't make them like that anymore. Let me tell you something, folks. You have these ears, and they don't make them like that anymore. To be quite fair, one reason why you need an audiologist more than a technician is because the very best devices are still devices. They are not your God-given ears. Nobody made ears like God. So that's the reason why, if you think you don't need hearing aids, go to Sound Advice and be checked. You might be surprised at what you're missing.
I know, Paul, I've got to bring this up. You can go into hearing Sound Advice, and you can say, well, I need to have my ears checked for wax buildup. And you guys will, squirt some stuff in there, and they will wash them out. And sometimes that's all it takes is that.
And
Yep.
by the way, leave the Q-tips in the grocery store.
Thank you.
Don't buy
Yeah.
Q-tips and take them home and start digging out your ears. I know people who do. I know a very intelligent young woman who has done that for years, and I mean, she's super intelligent. But when it comes to ear care, obviously she doesn't know much. And I have two members of my family, a father and son, a son and a grandson. It's like it was congenital with them, digging in their ears. I tried it one time. I pushed wax in so deep, I went up to Maranatha where Nancy was working, and I said, Mama, you need to clean out my ears. I can't hear. And she couldn't get it out of there. She had the thing to squirt the water in, do all that. I ended up having to go to my primary care physician. You guys weren't in business. Went to my primary care physician, and he turned me over to a nurse practitioner who worked and worked and worked and finally got that ball of wax out. And their great advice was, don't use Q-tips.
That's right.
So, Matthew, Dylan, Pearson, no Q-tips. Jason, Festus, Cobb, no Q-tips, all right?
No,
Let's leave those. How much time do I have left?
5 minutes before you can do your slow close.
5 minutes before my slow close. Now, you don't want to miss that, so don't go. You have to stay here. Let's go back to what you do. When did you graduate and get your Doctor of Audiology?
I graduated in 2013.
Okay, so she's on the cutting edge, really, about hearing. Do you have any kind of continuing brush up or seminars and that sort of thing and material to keep up with advances?
So for the patients, we do seminars quarterly. Sometimes we do them a little bit more often as needed. Lunch and learns, things like that, and that's just to educate the general public. It's not hearing aids kind of like today. They're not just devices for older people. It's, you need to be aware how to take care of your ears and your mental health. So that's going to be the best. Sometimes looking online can be very overwhelming. We do have a resource book on our website. It's at soundadvicehearing.com.
Now remember that, soundadvicehearing.com.
And, more importantly, just because we are so individualized, scheduling an appointment with one of our doctors is going to give you the most answers. And
Exactly.
we'll take the time to talk to you and
Yes.
get to know you. So,
I'm telling you, we have never received anything but just wonderful service
I mean,
at Sound Advice.
Yeah, you walk in there and you're the only person in the world, and they take really, 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 really good care of you.
And everything is nice and new and
Yes.
clean and bright and cheerful, and
right.
the environment is worth the visit. That's for sure. It's 9:51, so we've got about 4 minutes before my slow close. I want to remind our listeners, too, that we're not only here to talk about hearing loss, but hearing gain, because if you've had a loss, and you may not even know you had a loss, think about what it'll mean if you have a hearing gain. I was really shocked. Years ago, we had one of our Axe Fest banquets, and I was in charge. This is before Dr. Whining took over. And a friend of mine, who was our minister of music and a great supporter, Cliff Wagner, he had died tragically at the age of 47 back in February of 2004. So this was like the summer of 2004. We had a CD, and I was having our sound person play that CD. And I'm up here at the microphone, and I keep telling him, bring the sound. I didn't know it, but he was blasting everybody away. I had a hearing loss. We went to dinner another time with right after that with a couple from Kansas City, and he wore the old-time hearing aids that you could actually see them. Mine are pretty much invisible. And at dinner, he said, Paul, you have a hearing loss. I said, no, nothing wrong with my ears. He said, you had them keep cranking up Cliff's music. You have a hearing loss. I'm telling you, you need to have your ears checked. I didn't believe him. I put it off and put it off and put it off until curiosity got the best of me. And there was a hearing seminar in Hollister at College of the Ozarks. And somebody told me about it. So I told Nancy, let's go. So we drove all the way down there and had a fine meal, a really good meal in their big dining room. And this man made a presentation that opened my eyes and my ears. So when afterwards I was making an appointment to get checked, and they said, well, you don't have to come all the way down here. Dr. Brian Vesely is in Springfield. So that's how I met Dr. Vesely. And if I had not gone to that seminar, I might still be walking around saying, huh? You know.
I don't know if Nancy would allow that, but.
So anyway, it's not a case of hearing loss. We want to really emphasize hearing gain, like gain on your soundboards, guys, you know. Huh? Put the gain up. Oh, you guys. That's like, remember Ferret Face on MASH? Dr. Burns, they called him Ferret Face. He'd say to Hawkeye and BJ, oh, you guys.
Time for your slow close.
Do what?
You have time for your slow close.
Oh, my slow close. This is a treat. You have been watching and listening to the friendliest show on radio, the best look on Facebook. Don't go get your car lube now. Stay with YouTube. I'm Paul Collins. This is my co-host, my wife, Nancy. And we have had as our special guest today, Dr. Lindsay Hobbs. Go see her at Sound Advice. Call that number on your screen. Go to the website, soundadvicehearing.com. And whatever you do, next Friday morning, catch us at 9:30, right after Dr. Marty Hamilton. I want you to have a wonderful weekend. Friday will happen this same time next week at 9:30, because Friday comes up every week, believe it or not. See you then. Bye-bye.